Welcome to the Real Estate Pros Show, where we interview real estate investing professionals from coast to coast, as well as the service providers that serve the real estate investing industry. Our goal is simple: share what's working now to help you improve and scale your business to the next level and meet the pros that can help you get there. Real Estate Pros is powered by Investor Fuel, America's leader in helping real estate investors and professionals build the business you need to live the life you've always dreamed of. Let's start today's show. Property insurance for real estate investors doesn't have to be difficult, but it does need to be there to protect you when you need it. MyInvestorInsurance.com not only provides insurance at 15 to 30% cheaper than traditional agencies, it's built specifically for real estate investors like you. You can set up an account in about 2 minutes, get quotes on properties, turn on and turn off insurance for your fix and flip or rental properties in around 2 minutes without having to talk to anyone directly, all through our portal. There's no better way or faster way to make sure you've got the coverage you need to protect you, and no more lengthy policies either. Once you're set up, you're billed monthly and prorated by the day for however long your policy is active. It's powered by MSI, the third largest independent MGA, with 1.5 million customers and more than $1 billion in cumulative premiums written. Get set up today in about 2 minutes at myinvestorinsurance.com/fuel.
Hey folks, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Dylan Silver, and today on the show I have real estate wholesaler, 1,000 deals, more than that, completed over the last 5 years with Evolve Estate in Tampa, Florida, Frank Dixon. Frank, welcome to the show.
Dylan, I appreciate you having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I always like to start off at the top, Frank, by asking guests how they got into real estate.
Yeah, so just to start from the beginning, I went to school at the University of Florida, go Gators, and I got a degree in business, and then I took the traditional route of getting a degree and then going into the corporate world and getting a corporate job. So I started out doing that. Right out of college, I got a corporate job. It had a nice little cushion to it, but in the first week of training, or the first 1 or 2 weeks of training, I thought to myself, there's got to be more than this. Like, I I don't want to spend the next 40 years of my life in the corporate world, and doing this. There's got to be a bigger vision and a bigger thing for me. So from there, I kind of just went and researched, how can I become wealthy, basically.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out a bigger vision for myself, because that is kind of what I got to it in the first week or 2 weeks. And upon doing some research and googling how to become wealthy, real estate kept popping up. Literally, real estate this, real estate that. So I kind of jumped on that train, and what really got me hooked was I kept seeing Bigger Pockets. So I started listening to their podcast on Bigger Pockets, basically interviewing investors that started out from nothing and created a life for themselves that sounded intriguing. So yeah, I started listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast, and I got hooked on real estate ever since. So that's pretty much how I got into real estate, was
Through Bigger Pockets.
yeah, just through Bigger Pockets and listening to their podcasts and stuff like that.
What was the transition like from going corporate to then real estate? And did you work for someone else for a time being? How did that process look?
Yeah, so I worked in the corporate world for 2 years, but I basically got the real estate bug in the first month or so into my corporate world position. But yeah, I got the real estate bug early on, and then I pretty much worked that job for 2 years, and on the side I was just devouring content. I was, learning everything about real estate. I was super bought into the ideal of real estate, and I always had the vision while working my corporate job of how can I turn this into a full-time thing. So that's kind of the timeline there. It was a 2 year period with the corporate world, and then I just kept, listening to podcasts, reading books, all that good stuff. And then I was living with my brother at the time. That was actually in St. Petersburg, and the
Oh.
office that I worked for was in Orlando. So every day I would commute 2.5 hours from my brother's house in St. Petersburg to the corporate office in Orlando. So it would be 4 to 5 hour round trip daily.
So this is while you are transitioning from the corporate job, or you had the corporate job at this point?
Stop living on an island and join the #1 mastermind in America for professional real estate investors. Investor Fuel is a community of hundreds of the nation's top investors working together to build stronger businesses and better lives. In addition to the amazing community of real estate investors acting as a board of advisors for one another, Investor Fuel members have access to 100% funding on purchase and repairs for our members only, a health insurance program, and benefits and discounts that more than pays for the membership of most of our members, meaning it's actually costing you money to not be a member of Investor Fuel. If you're looking to scale your business and build a business that allows you to live the life of your dreams, please visit investorfuel.com today and book a call with our team.
Yeah, so this was very, very beginning at the corporate job. So that's kind of how I got into my first deal, basically, was I started listening to the podcast, and then one podcast was just like, here's a simple way to get into your first deal. Go buy a property, owner occupied, put 3 to 5% down, and that's an easy way to get into your first deal. So I ended up buying a condo for my first deal ever, kind of 6 months into my corporate career.
Yeah.
And then I kind of ran from there. And then, yeah.
So that condo, use it as a long-term rental?
Yeah, so right now it's a long-term rental. At the time, when I was working my corporate job, I didn't have a lot of money to purchase a property. So I only had probably like 2 to 3 thousand to buy a property, which is not a lot. So I found it as a property that I could move into because I was driving from St. Pete to Orlando. So I found it in Orlando, and yeah, sure enough, I ended up finding an agent to help me get the deal, and then I bought it for $128,000 with 3% down or something like that on an FHA loan. And
Wow.
then it's funny because I didn't have enough money for the down payment on that property. So I had to ask my boss for like a signing bonus of some sort because I never got a signing bonus when I started with the
Wow.
company. So I ended up getting a $3,000 signing bonus to help get me into the deal and so that I didn't have to drive 4 hours every single day. So yeah, I did live in it. It's a 2 bedroom, 2 bath condo. And then, at the time your rent or your mortgage is your biggest expense, and I wasn't making a ton of money starting off my corporate job.
Sure.
So I thought, okay, let me rent out the second bedroom to my brother. So that's what I did to help alleviate my, living expenses so I can generate more money you know, to help invest into my real estate dreams and aspirations. So I rented out the second bedroom for, 600 to 700 bucks, which basically covered my mortgage on the property. So I did that for a little bit and then eventually ended up moving out, and now I rent out both bedrooms by the room, and it's been a property that I've owned since 2019.
And so I don't want to gloss over the commute. So you were going from Orlando to, you mentioned Tampa or St. Pete area every day for 6 months for half a year.
Yep.
So it's like
Yep.
4 hours in your car.
Yeah, and it was probably a little under 6 months, but yeah, I was doing that
Let's call it 4 or 5. Yeah.
pretty much every day. And if anybody knows about Orlando, Tampa, it's I-4, which is a popular highway, which has a lot of traffic. So, yeah, you know,
What was
there's
that
no,
like?
it was a lot, but at the time it was all that I knew. I had to do
Yeah.
what I had to do in order to, keep things moving.
Well,
So,
I'll tell you what, Frank, I didn't do anything close to that, but when I'm in North Dallas, and it was about I'd say a 50-minute commute there in the mornings and then an hour and a half commute back. And in order to get my real estate license, I did uh, 8-hour days, and then I also did 14-hour days at the real estate school for about a month. And at the end of that, it was a long day, don't get me wrong, but the commute would just destroy me because I was
yeah,
like dragging. I'd have to pull over sometimes. And so you're doing that every day for months and months and months. You must have been waking up at like, the crack of dawn.
Yeah. Yep, I had to wake up early and I had to go to bed early.
Oh man. So you're doing
Yeah.
that. You get the first condo, you're living in the condo, and you're listening to Bigger Pockets, working the job. Did you then sort of put real estate on the back burner as far as doing deals until you left the corporate job, or were you actually doing wholesale deals while you were at the corporate job?
Yeah, so that was on the back burner. I was always learning, listening, like I said, listening to podcasts, reading books, all that good
Have to
stuff.
do both, yeah.
But the corporate job was pretty demanding too. I was a project manager and it was, 60, 70 hours a week. So
Yeah.
that was pretty demanding at the time. So it was tough in order to, to try to do deals on the side. So that's the only deal that I did while working the corporate job. And then once that ended is when when things picked up.
If you're looking for consistent, high-quality leads, look no further than Investor Machine. Investor Machine isn't just another agency, it's the most sophisticated, data-driven lead generation company on the planet for real estate investors, and serves the role of being not just a lead generator for your business, but a marketing partner that is helping you achieve your goals along the way. Go to investormachine.com to learn more and schedule a call with our team today.
And then going from the corporate job to then real estate wholesale, were you working for yourself? Did you start Evolve? Were you working for other people? What was that transition process like?
Yeah, so I worked at this job until 2020, COVID. So I got laid off in 2020, which was a blessing in disguise because
Yeah,
it kind of forced me to get
take it
into,
real estate, yeah.
yeah, to get into real estate. So I tried doing it on my own at first. Didn't really go that well. I had so many questions. I had no idea what I was doing. I just lacked confidence in everything that I was doing, whether it was cold calling sellers, trying to get a property under contract. How do I reach out to the title company? Do I call them?
I had
Do
the
I
same
email
issue with
them?
that. Yeah, yep.
Like, what happens when I do get a deal under contract? So I just had so many questions, and I was trying my best, but it got to a point where I was like, okay, if this is something that I'm serious about, how can I shortcut my learning curve? And from there, I did a lot of reflection, and I figured out, let me find somebody who's crushing this, let me go work for them or try to provide value for them in some way so that way I can learn from them and pretty much shorten my learning curve.
And how did you find that person or that company?
Google. I
Google.
think
So you reached
I
out to them from the Google.
yeah, I just Googled, I was laid off. I didn't have much going on. So it's funny because I started researching project manager roles and I had zero desire to be a project
Go
manager.
back.
It's just I had that experience, so I was literally just researching jobs that I had experience in, and deep down something was bothering me. It was like I know I want to be in real estate, so
Yep.
I eventually started looking at real estate stuff, and yeah, I just Googled real estate companies at the time. My girlfriend at the time, she's my wife now, but she was living in Fort Lauderdale, so I think I was just Googling Fort Lauderdale real estate companies and just going from there.
I had a similar experience. So I uh, was working for a company, ended up getting laid off from that company, ended up moving to basically a time period where I was determining what is it that I'm going to do? Am I going to go back into the car business? Am I going to start my own shop? What am I going to do? And I was just Googling, I didn't think anyone else was doing this, but I was just Googling real estate wholesale and seeing which ones would come up first in the search. And then I was calling these places. Walking, I remember, this is funny, I had a kind of a decently badly broken leg at the time. And I literally was walking with a cane. So I was going to these interviews with a cane and then just talking to these guys. And they were like, how did you find us? And, how did you know we were hiring? And I was like, well, I didn't really know, but I mean, we're here now. And so ended up getting an opportunity where I went from being a W-2 in the previous job, which was kind of a limited scope, to
Right.
then really being in charge of so many different sides of the game as a 1099 contract for a wholesale company. And things didn't end up working out there. The company faced some tough times, but I learned so much from that opportunity. And then I realized, hey, I can do this. I can start, JVing on deals with people that I sourced the deal. And then from there, I started to see kind of, I would say, the light at the end of the tunnel. Like you mentioned title companies, like how do I interact with title companies? I was able to see the whole game. And so at some point in time, pivoting back to your story here, you're you're working with this company that you found off of Google, and at some point you're realizing I can do this on my own. And what was that point for you? And was it something like, I always knew that I was going to go do my own thing, or were you thinking like, hey, I'm going to stick with this operation for a while?
If you're a new or newer real estate investor looking to launch or grow your real estate investing business, please check out Investor Fuel Club. It's a coaching community, but unlike anything you've ever seen before. And you can actually partner with members of our mastermind from coast to coast on deals right in your market. There's no better opportunity to build a consistent business than to literally partner with pros to help you avoid costly mistakes, avoid the need for capital to do deals, and help you eliminate your fears as you're starting your business. Learn more about Investor Fuel Club at investorfuel.com/club.
Yeah, I think deep down it was always something that I wanted to do on my own. And my intentions with this company was to go in and pretty much learn everything that I could possibly learn because it was a large company that was doing the business at scale.
Yeah.
So I knew if I put myself in this company and surrounded myself with people that were doing the daily activities, that I would learn a ton versus being on my own. And so that's pretty much what I did. So I was at this company at the beginning of around August of 2020. So I started at this company as a dispo agent, and I was literally just cold calling investors. That's all I
Investors.
was doing.
Yeah.
The ad, the ad was you can make $50,000 to $75,000 a year. If you're good, you can make closer to that $75,000. And it was a dispo agent. So literally just going out there, cold calling investors, building relationships to basically get them aligned with buying our properties.
Do you
So
remember which tools you were using? Were you using like Investor Lift, PropStream? How were you finding investors?
no, we didn't have any of that. We just had an email blast.
You had an email blast. So did you have phone numbers?
Yeah, we had phone numbers. So we had an investor database, of course.
Okay.
And keep in mind, this company was around since 2006. So
Hmm.
they've been building that investor
For
database
a
since
while.
2006. So we had
Tons of
five,
investors.
six, seven, eight, 10,000 investors in our investor database, and stuff like that. So
And so your job was then to kind of mine and create the ones that are the hottest investors, the most likely to buy, and then present them those deals. At what point, chronologically here, did you start thinking about, okay, now I'm ready for Evolve to take place or for me to launch my own deal?
yeah, so I started out as a dispo agent. I did really well at that, and I ended up making more than the 75,000 in my first year. I made close to 100,000 my first year doing that. And
You're like,
then
this beats the corporate job, yeah.
oh, 100%. And then I pretty much got promoted to a position where I ran my own region. So I did that for 2.5 years. And I'll be honest, once I got that position, I really enjoyed it because I was making good money. I was making multiple six figures in that position. I was running my own region. So I had acquisition agents under me. I had a disto agent under me full time. And I was basically running my own business inside of the business.
Yeah.
And I was making more money than I could ever imagine. I was creating a lot of extra income so that I could start buying my own properties. And the company had a system where you could buy properties through the company at a discount, at like a more discounted rate. Sorry, a more discounted rate
And
than what we
spread,
could
yeah.
sell to the investors
Right.
because you get the in-house discount. So I got pretty comfortable with that position, making good money, and I learned a ton with that position. I was in charge of a region. When I first was in charge of a region, we were doing around 2 million revenue a year in deals, and then I was able to grow it to a little under 4 million for the year. So I learned a ton. Was doing around 20 to 30 deals a month in this position, and in the middle of that, I didn't have any. I kind of lost sight of going out and starting my own thing because it was such a good position.
Yeah. I mean, you're
And then,
basically I call it an intrapreneur. Like you're not
yeah,
doing your own deal completely, but you have a lot of the flexibility without as much of the liability.
yeah, exactly. So I think at the two year mark of that, I'm always somebody that's trying to figure out how to get to the next level, that always wants to grow and try to get better. So I think in year two of that, it just became the same thing over and over and over again. And I became super comfortable on where I was, and I didn't feel like I was growing. So at that point, I did some, I meditated on it a little bit, but I think at that point I was like, all right, what's next for me? And that ultimately was going out and starting my own shop.
And so what was the first steps of that like? Did you find partners for Evolve? Did you, put in your notice and then, do everything at once? How did this process come about for you?
Yeah, I think over time in my position at the company, I was able to build a lot of relationships. So I built relationships with a lot of different wholesalers, investors that were buying, 200 deals a year, and I was able to pick people's brains. So I think closer to that 2 year mark, once I started realizing, there's got to be more. I've got to a point where I've been able to buy a few properties through the company, and I have a big nest egg built up. And what's next for me? How can I take this to the next level? And yeah, so I had those relationships built up in the position that I was in because I was the guy that had all the good deals. So when I was in that position, I was kind of able to leverage that to build the right relationships for me to help me transition into starting my own business.
What was the first 6 months or a year like with Evolve? And was it smooth sailing because you'd done this before with the previous company, or was it a lot of learning curves that maybe starting a business that was tricky?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of learning curves. So Evolve, we started in at the beginning of 2024, so it's been about a year and a half.
Okay.
The first 6 months, we got by, I would say, is how to summarize that. We got by and we remained profitable, but it wasn't by no means a company that was thriving. So just to give you a little background, when I first started, I know what I like and what I don't like, and I'm not somebody that was huge on the acquisition side of the business. So what I first did was I went and hired two acquisition guys. And then once I hired two acquisition guys, I was feeding the acquisition guys just cold call leads. So what I learned over time was that cold call leads are tough. You're
It
getting a
can
lot
wear you
more
down.
rejection.
It can wear you down.
They're getting a lot more rejection. So that the acquisition guys, when we first started, we got a couple deals. We had a 30 pop, and we had some deals flowing. There wasn't consistent, but we were getting decent deal flow over the first 6 months. But what I learned from that first 6 months was it's tougher. The marketing leads that you do get is super vital to everything else. It's not just about getting the cheapest lead and trying to get the highest ROI on that. So, yeah, I learned running a wholesale operation just on cold call leads and texting leads was tough. The acquisition guys were getting beat up. Those guys eventually got fed up and left because
Yeah.
it was just
I've done that role. I mean, it's tough to do a lot of the cold leads. It's brutal. I mean, it's demoralizing, right? Because you're hearing so many no's, and then you get a yes, right? But then, of course, when you're starting a company or growing or scaling a small company, it's not like there's tons of profit to be had. So,
Yeah.
with these deals, a lot of it's going to the bottom line. And so it can be draining. I totally get that.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I hired those two guys, and it was just me doing a lot of the transaction coordination and dispo side of the business. So they eventually left to a different company that was paying a salary because at the time I was only paying commission on deals that closed, and the guys that I hired at the time were looking for a salary plus commission on the deals that they closed. So it eventually didn't work out. So really quickly, I hired two people and lost two people.
You're
So
like back to square
as
one, yeah.
yeah, and when you're just starting a business, it can be tough once you're just starting, and you have this grand vision that you're gonna hire people, it's all gonna work out, you're gonna scale to six figures, and it's all just gonna go smooth, right? There's not gonna be any hiccups. So I learned very quickly how to adapt. So with that, I transitioned and I tried to hire basically talent overseas
Hmm.
in the Philippines. So I did that for a few months, and then I was still doing the cold calling and texting leads. We were doing that for a few months, and just wasn't seeing the results that I wanted. Right?
Yeah.
We were just doing cold calling and texting leads, so they were hard to convert. And then also the talent that we were using was overseas in the Philippines. Which I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that,
Language
but
barrier, yeah.
yeah, there's just a lot of headwinds when it comes to stuff like that. So, um, yeah, did that for a couple months, just getting by. And in the meantime, I have relationships with other wholesalers and people. So, since I have my strong suit in Dispo, I'm still out hustling on Facebook groups and building relationships with other wholesalers to sell their deals.
Yeah.
So I'm still working that avenue in the background while still trying to scale the operation to have leads, inbound leads, direct to seller that are coming straight to our acquisition guys. So I'm still out there hustling, getting deals. And then over a few months, I start to realize, okay, this outbound lead generation and with a combination of hiring overseas wasn't really working that great. So October of 2024 is kind of when the light turned on. And that's when we transitioned into inbound marketing. And since we started inbound marketing in October 2024, we've just seen a lot better results in a more clean and efficient operation.
Inbound marketing is expensive, so it was a tough, pill to swallow, right, initially. But then once you do it for a couple of months and you start to see the returns and you start to say, okay, well, I can justify this. But certainly it makes sense, right? You want to keep the operation running as efficiently as possible. And when you're starting out outbound or overseas, without the inbound leads, that's kind of a progression. Of course, ideal world, maybe we don't have to buy inbound leads, but
Yeah.
you mentioned all the things that can come along with it. It can be highly demoralizing. There can be turnover. People can kind of get burnt out from it. And then, it's just a very, very tricky thing. So,
Yep.
for folks who may be thinking about doing wholesale, or maybe they work in a job and are looking at doing wholesale deals on their own, what would be your feedback to folks based on your journey, what you've learned, and general advice to people who may be interested in wholesale?
Yeah. I think my biggest piece of advice if you're just starting or you're trying to break into wholesaling is go find somebody who's already crushing it and learn from them. And if that's a company that you can go work for and learn for, great. If it's a mentor that mentors you one on one, that's great too. But I think my biggest piece of advice is just find somebody that already knows what they're doing so you can shorten that learning curve and get the results yourself that much quicker.
Frank, we are coming up on time here. Where can folks go to learn more about your business and maybe reach out to you?
Yeah, Instagram. People can find me on Instagram. Frank J Dixon 3 is my Instagram handle, and that's probably the best place to reach me. You can DM me or whatever. If you have a deal that you need help selling or anything like that, or if you just have questions or want to chat about real estate in general, I'm happy to do so.
Frank, thank you so much for coming on the show here today. Congrats on your success and to your continued success.
Awesome. I appreciate you, Dylan. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for today's Real Estate Pros Show. You can learn more about the amazing benefits of the Investor Fuel Mastermind community, including surrounding yourself with hundreds of other rock stars, 100% financing for your deals, and members-only discounts from vendors you're likely already using that, as a member of Investor Fuel, will save you more than the cost of your membership. Visit investorfuel.com to learn more. If you're interested in joining us as a guest of this show, please visit investorfuel.com/pros to apply. You can also check the show notes for access to free resources, how to get access to world-class lead generation, and much more. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next show.